Hey,
Hello.
Izzy. Oh, are you happy for us to just go straight into recording?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Just can see that a notification came up on my screen. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, and you.
Yeah, so this is the first time that we're apparently chatting.
It is, yeah, indeed. Yeah, I've seen some of a couple of videos on YouTube. But yeah, obviously we've never kind of met or conversed, so
Hmm.
I'm
How are you?
well, thank you. Yeah, I'm good.
Nice.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. There seems to be a sinus infection or something happening at the moment, but
Oh no.
it's 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 quite all right. It is what it is. So,
Yeah, I've had one of them before actually. They can be quite nasty. I think I had
mm,
sinusitis and it sort of had sort of this pain all around here
yeah,
and like toothache and stuff. It wasn't that fun.
no, no. It's a bit like that with minus the toothache, thank goodness, but there we are. But otherwise, all good, yeah.
Good.
So there's no plan at all. This was just an idea that arisen like a few months back to basically make a playlist, like a series of videos called Conversations with No One.
Nice.
And well, this is the first one apparently. So there we are.
Oh, privileged.
Yeah, so what one thing I thought we could do perhaps is just share a little bit about what it is that we apparently do, because some people watching this may have never discovered the words Advaita or non-duality or anything. They may never have heard of the Open Secret or Tony Parsons or Alexis or Izzy. So maybe we could just sort of introduce this with that, like say
Mhm.
what it is that we apparently seem to do.
Okay. Do you want me to say?
Yeah, if you like, if you like.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, obviously there seems to be quite a few speakers now, but I can only really say what seems to happen here, I guess. So yeah, there just seems to be a sharing of non-duality, the words kind of non-duality that sort of make it sound as if it's a topic, but
Mm.
really um the meetings are just a sharing of, well, nothing, of course. So, I mean, the words non-duality meaning obviously not two for anyone that doesn't really, hasn't really come across this. But really, the amazing thing is about this message that's shared, is that there's nothing that it's saying. So there's no one, you don't need to know what non-duality is or know what Advaita is or sort of have an intellectual understanding of a topic or anything like that. All that seems to be shared is an energetic communication that just basically um, suggests that this is all there is.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Totally, totally unknowable as well. It's one of the most favorite words at the moment is that it's just so totally ungraspable, undefinable. There's, although obviously concepts and words and terms get used, but it's so sort of intangible. It's so sort of there's just no way of holding it because it's not even an it to be held
Exactly.
onto. And there's something so sort of fresh and alive and gorgeous about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And then sort of if I'm asked or we're asked, like, what is it about? There's just nothing you can say because, as you say, it's not even an it that's being discussed. So
Mm.
there's no topic. So that's the freedom, I suppose. That's the unconditional freedom because yeah, there's no understanding needed. It's totally it doesn't sort of it's one of these very few things. So much in the world is like about based on knowledge and accumulating sort of knowledge and all of that, and this is just wonderfully blows all of that up. It's very refreshing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And it's not It's just not with any agenda either. Obviously, it's enjoyable, at least for this. It's very enjoyable to share and bask in and talk about. But it's just totally wonderfully without any meaning. It's so sort of it's or I sometimes think of it as a celebration. It's just like there's just nothing else. Wow.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that actually in my meeting last night, it came up sort of speaking about it like a bit of a song in that way. And that was lovely because someone spoke about music and how it's sort of just can be like just a joy and a resonance with music. And I was saying, yeah, that's a really nice like metaphor or whatever, just sort of, how it's just a song of freedom. It's just a joy. There's no sort of, it can just be heard as it's heard, but there's no need to understand the music. It's just enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the spontaneity as well. So what these I've been using these three words quite a lot recently. This is spontaneity, immediacy, and free flow. So these are the things that seem to be so sort of obvious. Like it's so obvious that everything that's appearing to happen, it seems to be more obvious for many people within these so-called meetings. But yeah, it just becomes more and more obvious that everything is totally spontaneous. It's totally immediate because there's no real distance, and it's totally flowing. Like it's all flowing. The autonomy is so obviously illusory. There's just totally, it's just all happening like a dance, like a dance.
Yeah, it's lovely in that way. Yeah, song and dance. Yeah, as you say, it's just boundless aliveness, and that can't be, it can't be known. It can't be sort of, the person's always trying to bundle that up into something or to catch it. But yeah, like free flow, it's just falling. It's just sort of exploding and just can't be, packaged in a nice little box, which is what the person would love for it to be.
Mm, mm, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
Just,
was also thinking, just before when you were saying about the meetings and stuff, how um it just the freedom, there's no preparation. There's just, and like for this, there's no sort of, oh, what are we going to discuss? There's just free flowing out, speaking, and that's just amazing. There's no, like you said, no agenda, no, topic that needs to be discussed, no sort of plan for the meetings. It just wonderfully happens by itself. Yeah.
yeah, lovely. Yeah. Well, there's probably not much else that could be said on this non-duality because it's all kind of obvious with this. Obviously, where it tends to get talked about a lot more and in detail when there's questions, but there aren't any questions. But perhaps we could talk a little bit about these characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious as to what Izzy likes really. What does Izzy like, and maybe even like how did you even discover this so-called non-message? Whatever you
Yeah,
want.
well, so I'm 23 now. And kind of growing up, I wasn't into spirituality, religion. I didn't grow up in a religious environment at all, really. We went to church occasionally, but nothing kind of, I didn't follow anything. I didn't really have a belief in God, nothing like that. But then it was probably when I was about 18 and I left school, and then sort of my life kind of started to break up a bit anyway, like kind of in terms of leaving school, thinking about the next step. Okay, what am I going to do? Go to uni, travel, jobs, all those sorts of questions start coming in. And then sort of started to suffer a bit more. And I'd never really sort of experienced kind of a deeper sort of suffering, I suppose, when I was at school. So I was sort of just kind of growing up as a child. I was quite lucky. I never really sort of had that. But then, yeah, 18, those sort of questions started coming in, and there started to be this kind of intensified seeking energy, I suppose. It was always there, but looking back now, I can kind of see that. Um, and then, yeah, so kind of through, I mean, to be honest, after that kind of moment of when I was 18, I never really then found the next step in terms of tried a few things, but kind of always still wasn't really ever sure. And then that's when I kind of started to, I suppose, inquire, like became more interested in the suffering, and then just kind of that started to lead to much more questions, much more inquiry. And I had been meditating a little bit from when I was about 14, probably, just like it's kind of much more secular sort of stuff. But then because of that suffering, I turned more to like towards Buddhism and started to really get more interested in the meditation and kind of the inquiry and all of that. And I probably did that for about, I'd say 3 or 4 years, probably until I was about 22, 21, 22. But then towards nothing really ever felt right in that. Nothing still didn't feel like it was kind of satisfying me, really. And I went to, I can't exactly, to be honest, I can't remember the exact order of it, but it was actually my brother. He started going to some monasteries in the UK, just sort of staying there. And I decided, because that kind of got that on my radar. So I went and stayed at a place called Chithurst in Sussex, and another one sort of around Hemel Hempstead in London. And that was, you know, lovely kind of places, and really met some really nice people. And I can't, as I say, I can't 100% remember the events, but somewhere within all of this, there would just seem to be a sort of awakening in kind of, I mean, if you want to call it that, but just sort of a real shift in energy when I was at one of these monasteries. And it was actually, I was reading a book about Ramana Maharshi. And obviously looking back now, I can see that it wasn't caused by anything. It wasn't caused by reading that book, but something within the words that was being read, it was to do with, I mean, because obviously that's a lot more to do with the awareness stuff and all of that. But something just seemed to shift something in the system, and there just seemed to be a real opening with that. And then after that, nothing was the same. Because it just, the whole, basically, like, I felt half of me kind of just died in that moment, but then there was still something there. And I might have discovered non-duality by then, I can't remember, but it was much more like Rupert, Spira, and Francis and all of that. And that probably only lasted about a year. And I actually went to see Francis in Paris with my brother. So that, I think, was after this sort of awakening thing. And then, so there was like a real shift in the system, but there was definitely still some sort of seeking. And there was also a real sense of superiority after having this kind of awakening. There was a real sense of like, you know, I know the truth. Like I'm at more peace than you little ones, and all of this.
Yeah.
Oh, very innocent when I look back, but yeah, definitely a real kind of sense of being closer, and sort of, you know, having like a connection with Francis when he was saying all this stuff about awareness, you know, being like kind of, there was a knowing there, like a shared thing. And then I went back to a monastery, the one in Sussex, stayed there for a bit, and then I read Perfect Brilliant Stillness by David Cass. I'm not sure if you know that one.
No, I haven't heard that one.
Well, it's quite a big book actually, but that sort of, again, I mean, by this time I was having quite a few glimpses, and that sort of seemed to trigger a bit of a shift again. So all the sort of stuff seemed to be going on. But actually, it was only then at the monastery that I came across someone, a lay person who was visiting, and he was friends with Tony. And that was the first ever time, and this was probably only like 2022. That was the first time I'd ever heard of Tony and the Open Secret. and then something seemed to sort of, so I think I'd seen Andreas actually in Brighton. Sorry, this is all, the timeline's all a bit murky, but sort of skipping around a lot. But I think I'd seen Andreas in Brighton a few months prior, because a friend had recommended that. But I was still very much on the Rupert and Francis train at that point, so the message wasn't heard so much. Parts of it were, but I remember someone actually saying to me, like, because I was sort of saying, you know, about Rupert and all this, and he was sort of saying, like, yeah, you know, this is way beyond all that, like that, this just blows all that up, sort of thing. And I remember being very defensive about it, like, what do you mean? Like, no, like, because obviously it promised so much unconditional love for me that I was so sort of attached to that, I suppose. So yeah, then Kate, yeah, heard more about Tony, read The Open Secret, and then, because I was really big into reading, and I still love reading, but now it's just more just fiction and stuff I enjoy. But the spiritual reading was really, I mean, I read so many books kind of looking for the truth, if you like. And then after I read The Open Secret, that was that. I sort of, in terms of reading, I didn't read another spiritual.
No. It ruined every other reading material.
Oh, it totally did. It totally did. It was in a wonderful way. I was just like,
totally.
oh, I mean, it was a relief, but also it was a bit like crump, like, what do I do now? Because I was reading so much. It was just like so much energy was going towards that. And then yeah, after reading Tony's book, the whole thing just collapsed. It was so clear. To me still at that point, but it was just so clear that there was no answer in a book. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Quite a story and a journey.
Yeah. I think that sort of it was very, and then after that, it was very, I then came across other speakers on YouTube. So I think I then looked up Tony and then sort of made the connection with Andreas and realized that was the same thing he'd been saying. And then from there, this was then the only message really that I was interested in. So all the awareness stuff went. So yeah, I was listening to like Kenneth, Andreas, Jim, bit of Tony. To be honest, mainly it was Andreas and a little bit of Kenneth. And then I listened so much, became very, very obsessed with it. And kind of neurotic and trying sort of really fit it out in a sort of obsessive compulsive kind of algorithm, you know, mentally really trying to fit it into something. And so then I couldn't listen to it anymore because it was just far too triggering. I had to just, no, I can't do that. And then about January 23, so probably about maybe just under a year after I'd even heard of Tony, I went down to Devon and had sort of a month down there on my own and just kind of just had a bit of my own space, and this is when this whole kind of thing unfolded and then just collapsed. So yeah.
Yeah, wow. Well, thanks for taking us on that journey.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I mean I've sort of said, you know, in bits and pieces on my meetings a bit of the background, but that's nice sort of you know, a bit scattered, but a bit more of a comprehensive kind of.
Sure. It's nice actually hearing it, you know, like hearing it there, yeah. Yeah, it can resonate a lot with a lot of this, in terms of suffering and seeking materially and then spiritually, which is, let's be honest, it's just another form of materialism. And yeah, Buddhism was the thing for this for me for a long time as well. And yeah, there was this sense that this isn't quite working for some reason or other. For some reason or other, it's so profound and deep, but it seemed like something was missing somehow. Like it's so eloquent, and it's very sort of innocent and wonderful and colourful, with all of the loads of different traditions of this one religion. But somehow or other, it just seems to be missing, just ever so slightly, just seem to be missing something. Yeah, and then yeah, it was like then I discovered Rupert as well, and Muji
Oh,
and
okay.
Eckhart Tolle,
Okay.
and it was like I really loved that, because it was like it didn't contradict anything that the Buddha apparently had to say, or Lao Tzu, or Nagarjuna and all of the other yogis and tantric people and all the rest of it. They didn't seem to be against any of that. They didn't seem to contradict any of it. So it was like, oh, okay, so I can listen to these guys and still sort of it's Buddhist friendly,
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, I'll pursue this more then. And that seemed to be very promising, as you said, the whole awareness of awareness thing,
Mm, mm,
just being present and the rest of it. But yeah, just like yourself, it just, again, there was this little niggling, like, is this it? Is this,
mm,
I mean, not is this it in the sense of, is it this simple, but is this it in the sense of, this doesn't feel like it. This doesn't feel completion. This doesn't
mm.
feel like wholeness. There's still a sense of separation and a subtle niggling dis-ease. Um, Despite the delivery of these speakers and teachers, and despite how apparently clear and established they are, there was like, let's just go shopping a little bit more. And
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? Let's just make sure.
and so how I discovered Tony was the Dream Bus panel. So
Oh
I was
yeah.
like listening to Rupert, like he was my go-to guy for a long time, and he was on the Dream Bus panel. So I watched, because I was watching all of Rupert's videos, I then watched Rupert's video on the Dream Bus situation, and he was pretty much saying the same thing. And then, as you can imagine, like all of these thumbnails on the side, it's like, oh, who else is on this panel? And then, of course, eventually, sooner or later, Tony popped up. And the first time I heard what he had to say, I I didn't even realize that it was totally different at first. It sounded, but it's
Mm,
like they call it the selective deafness, when
mm,
there's a total resistance and reluctance to even acknowledge the possibility that there's no one actually in a body. There's this total selective deafness seemed to be happening, because it was like this was indoctrinated with the whole Atma Vichara, self-abidance awareness model and program and practice. There was no sort of receptivity at all to accept the possibility that, or even acknowledge the possibility that actually it's not quite getting it. So when it heard Tony speak, it didn't even register what he was even saying. And
right, yeah.
it certainly, I didn't like hearing it for sure the first time. And I didn't, I mean, I love Tony so much now, but when I first watched that video, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I like this guy, because it was like, this is fucking scary. Like,
Mm,
wow. And so sort of straightforward and to the point and assertive. And I didn't like that at all. But of course, eventually, like, something drew this back. It was like a gravitational pull. It's the only
yeah,
way that it can be
amazing.
described, is like there's some sort of gravitational pull that there wasn't. And I honestly, like, can say that wasn't a personal thing. It was like, it didn't feel personal going back to him. But all the time I was after teachings and new methods and practices to live a more bearable life, that was personal. But this wasn't personal. It was beyond the person. It was like their gravitational pull that brought this back to Tony. That was beyond the person. That was interesting. And the more I sort of listened to him, and not him, but what was being shared from that body. It was like, yeah, um, incomprehensible love, incomprehensible love, love that's got nothing to do with anyone, you know, a radical love. It's like a love that's willing to kill, to
Yeah.
to destroy, the separation. It's that
Yeah.
is a compassion that can't be comprehended. Yeah.
It is incredible. I think if there is a real, obviously when you still feel separate, and then there can seem to be a real hearing of this. I mean, that is just stunning. When that
Mm-hmm.
when that sort of, and obviously very then painful for the person if they then seem to come back. Because I found that very hard, that sort of dancing with glimpses and then coming back and all that sort of game. But yeah, as you say, the simplicity and the radical love when it can just be heard, it's just like, I mean, it's indescribable. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Overwhelming.
Yeah.
Overwhelming for the psychophysical organism or whatever you want to call it. It's like,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
So was it just mainly Tony you then listened to, or did you sort of,
I think yeah, it certainly seems like Tony somehow or other that the delivery from Tony was not only was it clear, but it was so pure in a way. The uncompromising purity and unwillingness to compromise.
yeah.
For a lot of people, that is deemed threatening, and it kind of is. Let's be honest, it is threatening. But beyond the personal, it was like that uncompromising is actually the ultimate love and compassion, and it was really that was the only sort of body that really seemed to penetrate through the whole total fantasy illusion. I mean, I absolutely loved listening to Jim, and I love hearing these different characters and the sort of because the communication is almost always the same, like essentially, but the characteristics. It's fun seeing the different characteristics and
Yeah.
come along. So that's fun. Yeah, but it was mainly Tony and a bit of Jim as well. But I listened to Kenneth and Andreas and Naho and some others as well. Yeah.
I remember when I first heard Jim, because I didn't tend to listen to him so much, but I remember I think I maybe sort of like you, he sort of random, like these videos like they do with the algorithm just randomly pop up, and I sort of thought I'd check it out. And this was still around the time of the kind of stuff where I was still into the awareness a bit. And like you were saying earlier about it just falling on deaf ears, I think that just happened there with when I first listened to Jim. And I remember just it felt so cold, which is ironic, but it felt like a very, compared to the sort of unconditional love and the awareness type lure, and that sort of like fantasy of personal happiness and peace and all of that, that felt at the time from a personal perspective, that felt very like warm and loving, and that was it kind of thing. And then I remember, yeah, whenever I'd sort of then, if I'd listened to Jim at that time, it just felt so dead, ironically, which is because that's what it is, of course, for the person. But
Yeah.
I remember it feeling very cold, very, um, just very bland, and all of these sorts of things. And obviously, that's kind of what I was then. I was definitely, sort of projecting onto that, sort of wanting that, well, wanting to be addressed, really. And like you say, it just doesn't. It doesn't even see you. It doesn't even acknowledge you. So it is, yeah, it's incredible.
Sweet. But it's cool. It's cool hearing about all these different stories and journeys and the different people and all of this stuff. Um, yeah. Yeah, nothing else comes to mind to talk about all of that really. And I mean, it might come up again, but what about we could talk about speaking as well. Yeah, why don't we talk about speaking? How's that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so what yeah, what's happening for Izzy in speaking? What is yeah, is that I mean, it seems to be enjoyable, clearly, and fun and what about like Zooms and in person and how does that all go for you? Well, not for you, but with you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so mainly because when I first started speaking, it was well, basically straight after this kind of happened, collapsed. So like January 2023. And I've pretty much all done it on Zoom since then, really. Because obviously with COVID and stuff, a lot of it went on to Zoom. But then so I sort of started kind of coming out of that era, and it's kind of just carried on like that. So I do at the moment I'm doing about 3 meetings a week on Zoom. But it's really it's totally random, you know. It's like it's so sort of there just seems to be a real love of sharing here and love of speaking, and so there seems just be a real energy that just wants to go for that and just share this apparent message or this non-message or whatever. It just almost just their speaking just seems to want to come out in this way. So yeah, the meetings just kind of really just come sort of as an after of that sort of energy for sharing it, I suppose.
Mm.
I am doing more in person, like I've got a few more planned for the rest of this year. So speaking in Brighton at Brendan's,
Sweet.
um, yeah, in July,
Nice.
and then Amsterdam and London. And so I want to kind of, because I've done 2 in person only ever um,
Mm.
before, and I've been speaking for about a year or so, or whatever, on and off. But I love the in-person ones because being in the room with people,
Mm.
I mean, on Zoom it is lovely, but there's something very even more direct, you could say, kind of being in the room with people.
Yeah.
I think there's sort of just on Zoom, it can almost maybe feel for the person that there may be like concessions that can be made. But I think when it's like in person, there's the bodies are there and you're looking each other in the eye.
Mm. Mm.
There can just be a real like the knife can just really just the energy. It's so palpable. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems to be generally more intimate, despite being totally impersonal. It's paradoxically intimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing, which I think Zoom can't catch in the same way, sort of
Mm.
on the camera. Yeah, so that's kind of why I kind of I just really want to do them in person because it's just so lovely and yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Are you where do you mind me asking where you are based? Are you based in Brighton or near Brighton or somewhere there?
Yeah, near Brighton, so near Haywards Heath. It's about like half an hour north of Brighton. So
Hmm.
basically halfway between London and Brighton. Um, Yeah, pretty much actually directly like down in a line. So it's a good location. And Brighton's a lovely place for meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's always
Yes.
good fun.
Yes, it's lovely there. I went to Brighton back in July 2022, I think. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Maybe we could there's the possibility of meeting up
Yeah, because when are you coming to Brighton?
at the end of May. So it's the last weekend in May. Yes, there's a possibility to meet up. I don't know, it could happen. Who knows?
Well, that'll be, I mean, have you still got spaces on your
Yeah, there's one weekend space. There's two Saturday spaces. Yeah, so it depends, but there's one like space for the whole situation. Yeah, yeah,
Cool. Yeah, no, okay. So well, if not that, then yeah, we should definitely meet up. That would be nice.
yeah, yeah. That would be nice. So you mentioned going to Amsterdam possibly. That sounds nice.
Yeah. Well, I've been, so I love Amsterdam. I've been a couple of times before. My auntie's Dutch, so
Mm.
sort of been out there a little bit, and I know some of the other guys have spoken in Amsterdam, and there seems to be quite an interest in sort of in Holland and Germany for kind of non-duality. So yeah, that's confirmed actually in November. So sort of got flights booked and all that. So be going out there and speaking
Mm.
on the weekend. So
Awesome.
yeah.
And have you how did that happen? Was that like a place that got in touch with you, or did someone recommend a building of some kind? And
Well, I know a lot of, so I think Andreas and some of the other guys have spoken at, I don't really know how to pronounce it. I think like De Roos, I'm not sure. But it's like sort of a spiritual center in the middle of Amsterdam. And
Mm.
I have been in touch with them before, and it's a really lovely place. But I'm speaking at a place called the Karunika Center, which is in a different location, still in Amsterdam. And that's also like a sort of yoga, spiritual kind of, I mean, obviously this message is totally not spiritual. Let's not give across the wrong idea here, but we're not going to be meditating and sit and chanting. But
That's all right.
yeah, but yeah, they're nice, they're usually a nice setting and they lend themselves sort of
Mm.
a nice kind of room. So yeah, I just sort of booked that, and it's a little way off, so hopefully kind of get a few numbers, but we'll just see, see what happens, see who comes. And
Yeah, nice. Nice. Yeah.
yeah, and then obviously Brighton, sort of, Brendan's um kind of place, and that's always, I think that's, I love it as well because because it's not a center or a studio, it's just in his front room. And
Mm.
I know so like quite a few people just hold, quite a few of the other guys just, I think, if someone offers, they often, these meetings can be just in people's living rooms or wherever, there's no like, nothing's required, so it doesn't have to be anywhere, but somehow sort of being in someone's home, it that intimacy, like you were saying, I think can ramp up even more because it's just so ordinary. It's
Mm.
so lovely.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No one's sitting on any pedestals or
Yeah.
wearing the robes or stuff like
Well, maybe I will turn up in them, we'll see.
that. Yeah.
Get my robe on. Oh.
Oh, yeah. And what does Izzy like? What does Izzy like in
What
terms of
does it like?
hobbies, music? What other than sharing this radical and profound, beautiful thing, no thing. What happens?
Um, Great question. Well, to be honest, I don't really know how to answer that in sort of a way as like, it's not in categories anymore, if you know what I mean. Like I can't really sort of say a particular thing or things that I'm passionate about, but there are things that seem to happen more. So I mean, but now it's just very simple in many ways. I love walking my dog.
Hmm.
Um, I love I love being outside. I have always loved sport. So I suppose that's one thing that seems to have continued, I suppose. Not so much me sort of playing or participating. I still just love watching sport. There's sort of always been a love for that. And no, I suppose there is still a love for kind of playing sports, just hasn't happened so much recently. But I love books, as I was saying, and thankfully no longer sort of heavy spiritual reading, but just literature, fiction, um, photography, sort of. It's one part of kind of the meetings and stuff I quite enjoy. There seems to be a love for just, making the little sort of graphic posters and putting the little advert on, and when the meetings are, and doing the website. So there's always, since I was young, I've always kind of had a love for sort of making little things on the computer and doing little slideshows. I always used to do that when I was little, and taking photos and stuff like that. So
Mm.
yeah, I suppose maybe that, gives a very random array. I love music as well, listening to music, but of course, yeah, I mean, it's just like I said at the start, there's just no, like, I mean, yeah, there's just no one that knows that I
Yes,
like these things. It just
yeah,
seems to happen.
of course. Yeah, it's just organic preference
Yeah,
is whatever's yeah, whatever the character's into, it just happens. Yeah, it just happens. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So it's what I don't know how to answer, sort of like, what what am I passionate about, what do I like, because there's just literally, like, in this moment, so to speak, nothing comes up, because there's just no room for any of that kind of
Mm,
like knowledge, I suppose, of like what this likes. It's just not stored anywhere anymore, because just there's you and I talking, just seeming to happen. So, and then
mm,
they may be listening to music or going on a walk or whatever. But yeah, I mean, those are some things that seem to happen. Spending time in nature.
mm,
Yeah, just whatever, really, whatever kind of comes up in that moment. It's very random. Being
mm,
by the sea, I love being by the sea. So,
mm.
yeah.
So yeah, nice.
All sorts, really.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, it's just nice to hear, like, because obviously when there's a context of talking about nothing, it's like sometimes it can all seem a bit, well, it can seem totally impersonal. So it's nice
Yeah,
to like those sort of more, I don't know, the characteristics and stuff and what people get up to, regardless of what, the whole dream or no dream or whatever. Yeah. So that's
I
nice.
think you're so right, because I think when I used to listen as well, I think the person projects then onto the speaker and thinks, they're just then like a dead person, really, in that way. Just, doing the meetings and then just lying on their bed, like, waiting for the next meeting to resurrect and come back and
Yeah, yeah,
but yeah, there's just total humanity here. Like, there's just, a human being just doing whatever it does.
yes,
Um, so yeah, it is lovely. I know I'm with you on that, to sort of know what a bit more about, the speaker, and
yeah, yeah,
just for fun, really.
yeah, exactly. It's just for fun. It's just totally pointless. Pointless. I mean, fun is pointless. I think that's the beauty of it. Like that's why that's why this seems to love working and playing, like working with kids so much, because it's just like there's no point on the playground or when it's like messy play or soft play. It's like in that arena of like play, there's just no point at all, and that's
Yeah.
what's so fun. These kids, I go into a school and work with kids, and
Oh, nice.
it's just there's just no point. Like, and
Mm,
that's why
yeah.
it's so fun because
Yeah.
we do have a lot of fun and we laugh a lot, um,
Oh,
and it's precisely because there's no point, you
yeah.
know. So
Children are lovely in that way. There can be a real strong resonance in this way of this message, if you like, because there's
yeah,
just, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a massive story, but you could say, as people seem to get older, this sort of sense of separation or this seeking seems to become more, I don't know, more conscious or more intense or whatever it is. It
mm,
just seems
mm,
to kind of climax as the person gets older. But with children, even if that sort of seeking may be there, apparently, there just seems to be more of an openness and more of a joy, and just, yeah, just a
really.
pointlessness to it all.
Yeah, totally. And the total sort of, at least for many, lack of inhibitions. Like if
Yeah.
they're angry, you bloody know it.
Yeah, and lack of
Yeah, yeah.
self-consciousness.
They're
Yeah.
not holding back. Like there's no sort of, oh gosh, society wouldn't like me if I don't throw a tantrum. No,
Yeah.
that kid didn't get what they wanted. They're throwing
Yeah.
a tantrum in the middle of the supermarket and then it's done.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It's lovely. It's so unfiltered, isn't it? It's amazing.
exactly. Yes.
And actually, just as you were saying that, it made me think, because with sport and stuff, so I have always loved that growing up, but then I was quite good at sports, and I then started playing cricket like more seriously, and then
Mm,
I played that kind of really that became like my main sport from when I was about 9 probably until I was about 18. And I started playing at quite a high level. And the thing is, I always loved it when I was young, but it became something. And like you were saying, like with play, and I think that's what I've
Yeah,
always loved about sports. Like I'd always just play in my garden with my brother and it would just be fun, it'd just be pointless. There was no, I wouldn't have articulated like that at the time, but it's just joyful because it had no meaning behind it. But then I got sort of more involved in like, different higher level teams, and it's so serious. It became
exactly.
so serious, and I hated it. I then hated it.
That's the word. That's the word. When the story of moving from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, it's like for most bodies, it seems that everything gets so incredibly serious,
Yeah.
and that it's the seeking energy. At least for this, it was like everything just became very serious very quickly. And it's
Yeah,
like,
here too.
oh, it was ridiculous.
Hideous, I know.
And now it's like, oh, the childlike nature of
Mhm.
spontaneity and just play.
Oh, yeah.
And why the hell does everything have to be so serious? It doesn't. It doesn't.
It's amazing actually because there is I mean, I've spoken about my meetings about this sort of like unraveling almost of tension in the body, like this kind of all these layers of like feeling like all these years of feeling like someone kind of just slowly and gradually or whatever, just relaxing as the body just kind of lets go of all of that stuff on its own.
Mhm.
And there's just kind of there is just a childlikeness here, I suppose you could say, just and this energy of just this freedom just is like just and I'm not like immaturity, but just the childlike wonder, sort of,
Yeah,
for
totally.
no one. But yeah,
Totally, yeah. The
yeah.
childlike nature is no one. Yeah, it's totally no one.
But
Yeah.
it's amazing because, then there's such a clarity for no one, but just going round, and then there's a seeing of other bodies, and the seriousness is it's so, stark in kind of, it's so, what's the word? Like, can't think of that word, but it stands out so much.
Yes.
It's so kind of the yeah, just the seriousness of that seeking energy. It's just yeah.
Yeah. It's like concrete. It's like
Mm,
concrete. It's like
mm.
it's so rigid and
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
fixed, or at least it feels fixed, and it's yeah. Hmm.
And sometimes there's just like a laughter here of like, and not in like a mocking but just there's just laughter, and there's just like a almost just a like what's so serious? They're just because there's no seeing of that kind of problem anymore. And
Hmm.
obviously then there's a lot of, most people are walking around kind of with a problem, it seems. So
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Well, yeah. I'm curious about one thing, Izzy. I'm curious as to, because obviously the meetings, have a certain delivery, and there's a bit of a play, a bit of a dance of apparent energies, and people come with their stories and their situations and wanting answers, or on wanting the resonance or wanting to fall away. It's all wanting, and a lot of it is very playful, and it's so like vibrational and energetic, and there's a lot of laughter, but also sometimes because of the energy of seeking and wanting something to happen, or needing something to happen, or needing to know why this is happening, or whatever all the rest of the stories. What's your feeling about when people come along who are seemingly totally unwilling to even come anywhere near this sort of resonance or receptivity? What happens there for you?
Um, to be honest, I mean, I haven't really had many of them come to my meetings. I think they've been put off.
Yeah.
They don't want to face me, or they don't want to face
Oh.
it. Yeah, I actually, now you say it, I haven't really, maybe in the early days when I first started speaking, because most of the sort of faces that come now, I sort of got to know, and I know, you know, it's quite familiar. Oh, there's still a few new people that come along, but in the early days there were maybe a few more challenges, perhaps with people who hadn't heard the message at all and maybe thought it was more the awareness type thing.
Oh.
Yeah, but actually the interview I did with Walter the other day that we chatted about on Messenger, yeah, that was probably like that kind of confrontation is sort of the only sort of scratchiness that can seem to come up in the meetings, as sort of a total unwillingness to stand down from the awareness type model.
Mm.
But then there's, you know, this message can just be shared, and there's not necessarily an anger, but there's just a more of just a boredom with it in terms of, you know, not in like a personal judgment, but in a way of it's just clearly not being heard. So there's just, I mean, there's no point to any of it. So there's no, that's the wonderful thing, you know, there's no one here trying to prove that this is right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. There can be that sort of hostility in a way of the person
Yes.
trying to defend their ground.
Mm.
But you know, it is laughable in a way of, again, not mocking, but it's like it just doesn't matter, and it's so so
Yeah.
serious. And here there just seems to be just a bit, maybe just over time as well, since I first started doing it, there's just more of a chilled out, like, oh well, you know,
Yeah. It's
why does
just
it matter?
a sharing of, and there's something that seems to be quite relaxing about it, but also you know, simultaneously energizing, or like
Mm,
it's so sort of alive, but it's also a breath of
mm,
fresh air.
mm,
It's a paradox again. And yeah, yeah, because you know, because of the seriousness of the seeker, the apparent seeker, yeah, hostility can seem to come about from time to
mm,
time.
mm,
And I suppose, again, just referring to, you know, me, the me, when there was like an in and out, like a meing and being apparent phase of personal and impersonal. I was talking about it with friends and, you know, people, and quite early on, I was talking about it with a couple of people, and one of these people uh, got very, very angry. I mean, to the point in which it was like this didn't feel safe. I mean,
oh
they
wow,
were, it was almost violent, you know,
yeah,
and they asked the typical questions like, well, what about the crap that's happening in the Middle East? What about all of the wars? What about homicide? What about, you know?
classic. The me
And
loves that one.
yeah, yeah, because that's like the ultimate
Yeah,
defense mechanism. It's like, but I need to be here because who's going to save the world if I
yeah.
am not?
Yeah, exactly. That is it. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah,
If I wasn't here though, all, you know, the
yeah,
whole
the
world
world
would collapse.
it fall apart. Yeah, like gosh, you know, and because there was like, I suppose when there was this meaning and being apparently happening, it was like there was a desire to defend the
Mm,
non-position.
mm, mm,
There was still an agenda, a subtle
mm.
agenda to defend something that wasn't even anything. And so it was like, gosh, it put me off of speaking about it with anyone for a while because like it didn't, I didn't feel safe. But as this seems to percolate, for want of a better word. It was like, well, as you said, there's no need to prove anything. There's certainly no superiority. This is exposing the total bullshit of superiority and inferiority, and there's no sort of front here. There's
Yeah.
certainly no need to impress anyone, for goodness sake.
Mm.
There's no need, period.
Mm.
So it's like, whatever,
Mm.
and it's not serious. Only seriousness seems to emerge in this neurosis of personalization and separation. So yeah.
It's just amazing. And I think energetically, it just has such a different quality because the person is so used to standing its ground and then having something else. Well, having something trying to get through it, really, and
Mm.
like this tug. So, personal interactions, people are so used to kind of basically hitting heads with one another, and this message either, well, it does both. It cuts through you and it also doesn't even see you. So
Yeah.
it's just, someone can be going on and on and on trying to defend their position, and this message just doesn't even acknowledge that. It has
Yeah.
nothing to defend.
Doesn't even lift a finger.
No, exactly. And I think energetically that can just be, well, maybe can be sensed. And if there's an openness, maybe that then can just be heard that, this doesn't need to prove you right or wrong. It's only the person that's trying to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, luckily, I've seemed to have a really nice kind of, my disciples are really nice.
They're all bowing down and
Yeah,
behaving,
I've
aren't they?
trained them well. We have some good commandments they have to follow.
Yeah. Oh.
But yeah, no, I do seem to have a really nice sort of group of people that come along. So on the whole, the
Mm.
meetings are lovely, and there's no, but sometimes I have to say, sometimes I quite like the confrontation almost, because it can it adds a bit of fire,
Oh
it's so,
yeah.
because then it's all flavors. The meetings can just be anything, so anyone is welcome. It doesn't
Mm.
have to be all peace and agreeing with what's being said, not at all.
No, no, no. Yeah.
I like a bit of a challenge, keeps me on
Yeah.
my toes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, there's no more, I don't have any more, sort of ideas as to what to talk about. And it's been an hour, so shall we leave it there in terms of the recording?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Sounds.
then we'll just have a few more minutes if you like. But yeah, thanks Izzy for chatting and for doing this, because yeah, why not? It's fun.
Oh, it's been lovely. It's lovely to chat. Nice to sort of, yeah, meet each other virtually, but
Yeah, and we'll meet up potentially in Brighton or somewhere else. Yeah,
no, for sure. That'll be fun.
great. Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and that's it. Hold on a minute.